Come on, Once again, let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. Welcome to the program, the Max Kpakio Talk Show. The time for where I sit and broadcast is just 4 minutes past 9 o'clock here in the United Kingdom. Also GMT. Coming shortly, I'll be joined by my studio guest, special studio guest, Mr. Fidel C.T. Budy, the Secretary General of the Union of Liberian Organizations in the United Kingdom, ULOC, and of course, candidate for PhD and research as well. So we're just trying to set up our equipment. Let's see whether we can share this video before we start the show. So enjoy this one. In the meantime. Many of you know this one, right? Tija Julu. Oh, where we? Yeah, I came and met it, but I enjoy it as well. The puppy that used to be under the palm tree. All right, let's go now. Let's see. I think we are set to go. Let's see whether we can pause this music. Right now. So once again, we say welcome to this special edition of the Max Kpakio Talk Show, and we're live right now. I want to welcome you to this special edition. It's great, it's special because our studio guest is quite special as well. So let's see if we can go strictly now to guest. Mr. Budy, Fidel, how are you?
I'm doing good, Max. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks for asking, and it's great to have you on. Thanks and welcome, and thanks for accepting our invitation to come on the Max Kpakio Talk Show. So you can be our guest this time around, not the guest analyst, or at least as a full guest, where we can talk about you, your initiative, and everything. So it's a great pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much, Max. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, Fidel, let's get to know Fidel. I mean, in general, who is Mr. Fidel Budy, and which part of Liberia you come from, and everything. Let's get to know you, so at least people can get to know you good.
Well, I'm from all over the place. My family actually come from Sino County, but then my granddad settled in Nimba in the 60s and 70s, and spent the rest of his life there. My dad was an employee of Bong Mining Company, and that's where I was born. So I was born in Bong Mines. And then obviously the war came to Liberia, and we fled from Bong Mines to Ganta, where we have our where my granddad had settled earlier on in life. And then post-war, I moved to Monrovia to complete my high school education, which I did, and then at the St. Peter's Lutheran High School on 14th Street. and had one semester at the University of Liberia in 2001 before leaving Liberia and to come to the UK. So yeah, so we're from pretty much all we're from Sino. Got a lot of strong ties in Nimba County, but then I was actually born in Bong County as well. So and then kind of grew up in Montserrat. So I'm a little bit of four different counties from there in Liberia.
Wow. I mean, in terms of identity, I think people like you fit in most areas, especially if you give this background and people are listening to you in Liberia and say, wow, okay, this is a real Liberian man. I mean, four counties, between four counties. And so let's hope, yeah, we continue to push the development. But Fidel, first of all, you made mention of, migrating. I mean, when you are in the midst of civil war and you're living from Bong County to, let's say you leave from Lima to go Bong County, especially during the time what we're talking about, it doesn't look like, anybody running away from the war anyway. So how was it? Did you actually experience the war, or did you partly?
Well, it was the other way. We were leaving from Bong County, Bong Mines, and then going to Ganta. So I was in Bong Mines up until the NPFL arrived in Bong Mines. I was in Bong Mines when the IMPFL of Senator Prince Johnson came in and ousted the NPFL. So I didn't see the violence physically, physically, but we hear the shootings and we heard stories of things that happened whilst the IMPFL was in Bong Mines, and then they left, and then I think the decision was made by my late father after Prince Johnson had gone through Bong Mines that it was probably safer for us to move to Ganta, where we would be further away from the front lines and closer to probably places like the Ivory Coast and Guinea, which is also close by as well. So yeah, so we were there, first when the first group of NPFL soldiers came, and then obviously when IMPFL came through, I think my dad, my late father, made a decision because at that time I had my aunties and cousins who had fled Monrovia and were with us in Bong Mines, and I think the decision was made that there were too many of us to be in such volatile situation, given the fact that and this is not from personal experience. This is from what people have said. Usually, when one force is in a town and then they get ousted, the force that comes in usually don't recognize people in there, and sometimes they get very deadly. And then also when the force that was ousted comes back in, they feel that everyone who's there is like a traitor because obviously when those other guys came, you didn't. So and then people get killed for silly reasons. And I think my father decided that look, it was best for the family, and I think it was a good decision because we all, and this is not being disrespectful to anyone who lost family members during the war, but we didn't experience the kind of loss that other people would have experienced because obviously my late father made that decision that we were going to leave Bong Mines and go to Ganta, where to be honest, we were safer because we were really far away from what was going on in places like Max Kpakio County and Montserrat County, and later on, I think about a few months after we got to Ganta in 1990 or 91, I'm not sure what year it was, but I was sent to the Ivory Coast by my dad to live with a family member until things kind of calmed down a little bit, and then I returned to Liberia.
Well, okay. Especially in terms of what we went through, irrespective of whether you were told you managed to leave a bit early. At the end of the day, we all are still carrying something in our hearts, and we stay carrying some kind of memories, even if you are just told a story as well. but we all pass through it. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that perhaps in the future, I will link that question later on when I come back. But tell us, I would say, you growing up, whether it's a big family, small family, or so, how would say in your home, where you started life, do you remember anything that perhaps since you left or even since the war came, you continue to miss something like that? Whether it's the way Christmas used to be celebrated in a home, also, how was it like in your home?
Well, the thing is, when I was in Bongmans before the war, it was very pleasant. I lived with my father and my sister, so it was the three of us in the house. I think we had I think it was 2 bedroom, well, a 3 bedroom house, but then the third room was like a spare room because I used to sleep in my dad's room most of the time. Uh, it was beautiful. I had friends from all over the world. I had friends from the UK, from Germany, those who parents were in Liberia working for the bone mining company. Had a lot of my friends, Liberian friends, who we were, went to Bongtown school together. So it was very pleasant. Christmas time, it was probably as it was for most young people in Liberia or kids in Liberia at the time. You want to get your tummy gone and things like that during Christmas time and get your new outfit made. And then you go and visit family members and eat a lot of food. And and sometimes collect. I was always about the money, so I always collected some money from family members, and
Mm,
it was very pleasant. And we got to it was very safe. It was a very safe community, and we had a lot of fun as young kids. And then obviously when the war came, we a lot of that was destroyed, and it was I can't remember fondly any Christmas during the war, because I don't really think we celebrated Christmas much during the war, because we were mostly uh, concerned about food, uh, safety, shelter. And I think once you had something to eat, and just looking back on my life, I think growing up as a young kid, I kind of appreciated wherever I found myself. So when I had never been to Uganda before, that was my first time going there. We've got a farm there, so we used to go onto the farm on a weekend, and I would go and bring my wood to town, and start selling my little wood, behind the house to get my little pocket change for recess and stuff like that. So, and I enjoyed it. I was actually thinking about it today, and how I used to go on the farm with my grandma, and we'll go there, and the people who were working on the farm, I became close with some of their children. We used to play together, and we'll go swimming in the creek on the farm. And my grandma will give me some chicken, or sometimes you go on the farm and the people give you chicken there, and you bring it to town, and you keep the chicken until it lay eggs and have chicks, and then they become big chickens, and then you've got so it was fun. Obviously we were safe, and again, it's not disrespecting anyone. Who We all have our own stories, and my story
mm,
wasn't as difficult as many Liberians would tell you their stories were. My
yeah.
story was, I believe in God, and I believe I was shielded from the difficulties and the destruction and suffering that people went through, uh, for reasons that only God can explain, not my. I always had protection, pretty much. And even like I think the one time that I actually came very close to seeing difficulties was the 1992 octopus, because I had gone down to Monrovia to live with my auntie Rose. And she had a house in supermarket, where supermarket is, in Gardnersville. She's got a house there, so I went to live with her. and she was sending me to school and stuff like that. And we were at home, and she was. I was talking to someone the other day about this, and it's not funny, but now when you look back on it, you can smile, And she was cooking. I think I can't remember what it was. A Saturday, she was cooking pambota or something like that. And my two older cousins, her two sons, who are now in the States, were in the house with us that Saturday. My auntie was there as well, and then we saw a lot of people running from the swamp coming towards the main road, and then we were like, what's going on? So my older cousin, Thomas Brownell, he went out to inquire, like, oh, what's going on? And people were like, well, the rebels coming out of the swamps, and they're shooting and burning houses and stuff like that. And we left everything. So we left the pambota on the fire.
Wow.
We left our clothes. We left. We didn't even have time to lock up or anything like that. We just got out and ran up the Somalia Drive towards Central Monrovia. And that was my first time. That was the first time I think I came very close to experiencing firsthand some of the atrocities that went on in Liberia. But apart from that, I've always been very blessed that I was shielded from difficulties in Liberia, and
Wow.
I don't try to tell anyone that I understand some of the difficulties that they went through, because I wasn't unfortunate to go through those kind of situations.
Well, probably is that we can say fortunate or unfortunate, but at the end of the day, you are also scarred in a way, no matter how it is. I know about I was in Morovia doing multiples, in fact, throughout the war as well. And my vivid memories is Greystone, because I wasn't far from Greystone, and there where we used to go and spend the day, and on two occasions, human beings were scattered to pieces. Yeah, where I saw really, but it's like stones. So we saw a lot. Anyway, let's I would say in terms of education in your home, we'll say kind of a driving force there behind all of you, pushing you guys. How was it like?
Well, but my late father was primarily he was a teacher, so obviously he was very harsh on my sister and I in terms of our education. A lot of our current politicians, like young revolutionaries, were people that learned under my dad, because he was a revolutionary as well. Loved Fidel Castro, hence I've got the name Fidel. And yeah, so in terms of my dad never really like disciplined me much when I was a kid, until it came to my education. So when it came to doing homeworks and stuff like that, that's when I got the tough treatment, because obviously he felt very strongly about education. He was a very smart man. Well, most members of my family are, but he pushed my sister and I very hard. And again, I think unlike a lot of my peers, I was blessed that because I was always away from the fighting, I was always going to school. So when we went to Ganta, for example, I was enrolled in the Ganta United Methodist School. When I went to the Ivory Coast, I was in school. When I was with my auntie in Monrovia, as I mentioned, she was responsible for my education for a few years. So I always had people throughout my family, my mom, my dad, aunties, who were pushing for me to get an education, paying depending on where I was. And yeah, so there were, for the entire family understood the importance of education, and because of that, I didn't have time to rest on my laurels. People were always there to say, look, you have to go to school, you have to get good grades, you have to work hard. And I I didn't really play a lot when I was a kid, because like when I lived with my auntie, for example, You know, a lot of my colleagues from school in the community used to ask me, "Oh, do you live in Central Monrovia and come to Gardnersville to school?" Like, no, I live just close by. Well, we don't see you. Well, after school, you know, I do my housework and then I'm studying. And, you know, that was our routine. You know, you come from school, do your housework, and then you study. And so she kept, you know, my Auntie Rose kept a very close lid on us, and it was very important, you know, because you know, obviously now I can look back and, you know, whenever I see her, I remind her of the good things that she did in terms of making sure that we had. So it didn't matter where I was or who I lived with. Every member of my family made sure that, you know, I understood very clearly that if you're going to live working hard in terms of your education and making sure that you're doing what you need to do.
Is there anything you borrowed from all of those trends that you stay using, stay empowering you to go further? Is anything that you can still remember that you borrow from those disciplines also that stay keeping you going?
Well, I think, look, a lot of the things in terms of organization and planning of my life, you know, I got from Auntie Rose. You know, I lived with her for, I think, 3 or 4 years in the 90s, and she instilled in me strong disciplines, instilled in me a desire to fight for equality, to always strive to be the best. I remember once, I can't remember how old I was, but it's the first public speech I ever gave, and I was asked to introduce the guest speaker at our end of year. It was an elementary school at our end of year programs, and everyone said I did very well. You know, my principal was happy, the guest speaker was happy. I think he even offered to pay part of my fees and stuff like that. And on our way home, she started, giving it to me very hard. Like, oh, you were talking and I was telling you to speak up, to speak up. You know, people couldn't really hear you from the back, and I'm like, well, everybody said I did really well, so you can't really be tough on me. You know, you're the only. But you know, at the end of the day, that attitude of, you know, always looking for ways to criticize what you do is stuck with me in terms, and I think one of the flaws that I have in my life at this particular moment in time is how overcritical I am of the things I do. I always, whenever I do things, even today, I was completing a task for my project, and you know, I sent it in to one of my colleagues. I didn't think it was good. I just like, just look at it, you know. So she came back to me like, wow, this is very great, and I'm thinking, okay, I like the sound of that. But then obviously, you know, people will call that being hard on yourself. But then obviously, you know, I got that from Auntie, from the years that I lived with her. She was a very tough woman, and she taught me how to be very resilient and how to always find ways to improve. And I think that's stuck with me up until now, and I'm sure it's going to be something that I can pass on to my own children and other people that I come across in life as well.
All right, his name is Mr. Fidel Budy. Of course, he is the Secretary General for the Union of Liberian Organizations in the United Kingdom. He's also a candidate, PhD candidate, and of course, a researcher at a very university here in the United Kingdom. We're coming to get into that a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit about the organization first, which is the Union of Liberian Organization. But let's take a short musical break here. Let me play something to remind him, of course, of his background, I think. All right, another beautiful, beautiful piece there on our short musical break there, all the way from I think between Grand Crew and Roses. I don't know, but that's it. TJ Ju there giving us a break. Thank you so much, all of you that are sharing the video. I want to appreciate you. Yeah, sometimes when we're taking the time to share, we get the time as well. But for those of you that are sharing the video, thank you. We appreciate you very much. We have with us Mr. Fidel Budy. Fidel, I mean, now let's cross the Atlantic and come to the UK. You are still serving as the Secretary General for the Union of Liberian Organizations in the UK. How you got involved, first of all?
Well, the thing is, my involvement with the Liberian community goes back to when I first came to the UK, and we were giving support by the Liberian organization here, and I think we kind of just got involved because of that, obviously wanting to give back to the community in terms of having benefited from the organization. But then in terms of the current leadership of ULOC, I joined the leadership in 2015 as Secretary General for a 2-year term, and we completed that in 2017, and we were, as far as we were concerned, we had done the leadership had done enough, or the things that we planned to achieve anyway. So including getting a new and up-to-date constitution for the organization, registering the organization as a charity in the UK, raising enough funds to engage with projects in Liberia. We worked with World Liberia Connect in 2016 to take items over for Christmas for young people and for hospitals and clinics across the country. So we felt that in 2017, after 2 years, we had done enough. The people decided differently. So we were asked to continue for another 2 years because obviously I think people felt that what we were trying to achieve was taking the organization in the right direction. And so we stayed on for another 2 years. We actually have our annual general meeting that will be coming up on the 30th of March this year. So just over 2 months from now, where we will be electing new officers. And I think from what I understand, the current crop of leaders will be stepping aside to allow new leadership to come and take the organization in a different direction. So so at the end of the day, my involvement was initially to try and give back, but then once I became Secretary General, we realized we could do more for the organization as well.
So in terms of the welfare aspect of the organization itself, how is it in terms of with respect to the operational aspect here in the UK, young people involvement, other communities involvement, how's it been?
Well, the thing is, the level of involvement we've had from members of the Liberian community has been modest, to say the least. We have tried to engage with all organizations. We've tried to support different groups, and we've been successful in a lot of the things that we've done, but we've also had some setbacks as well in terms of not achieving everything that we wanted to achieve as a leader, a group of leaders. In terms of our partnership building, we've built partnerships with a lot of organizations here in the UK. We've also focused on things that we can do in Liberia. So obviously, I think one of the big things that projects we've undertaken has been the MOU that we signed with the Kids Education and Engagement Program project at KEEP, where we collect books and educational items for them and send them to Liberia. We had a fundraising dinner in November for KEEP as well, where we raised some money, which was transferred to the organization in December. And obviously, look, in terms of youth young people involvement, again, we haven't had the level of involvement that we probably wish we would have had. But it doesn't mean that the young people haven't engaged. They're just not engaged at the level that we'd hope that they would engage on, in terms of having more of them in leadership positions and more of them helping to push the organization forward. The hope is always that whenever there is a change in leadership, that more young people will come up and support the organization. And also, I think the organization itself needs to try and evolve as well, to try and meet young Liberians where they are. We've had events, so family day out. We've had a family day out to the beach to try and bring young people, to the young Liberians together. And recently we started to see some young Liberians getting involved, but there's always more that can be done. And I think hopefully the new set of leaders that will be coming in March will be able to continue the work that we've done and take the organization to the next level.
So in terms of maybe kind of a relationship between ULOC, which is the Union of Liberian Organizations in the UK, and other Liberian community organizations, whether it's here or across Europe and things. I mean, how has it been in terms of cordiality?
Well, I was in Liberia in December, and I met with the president of the European Federation of Liberian Associations, EFLA. We attended a meeting together at the office, or at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the Deputy Minister of State, and we try as best as we can to engage with EFLA. Locally, in terms of in the UK, we work with all of our member organizations and support them where they need us to support them, whether it be through donations, whether it be through fundraising events, whether it be through just attending some of their meetings. We try and do that. And this year we are taking the AGM to Northampton. So we move the AGM around on a yearly basis. Last year was in London. We've had it in Sheffield as well. So, at the end of the day, in terms of local engagement, we've worked really hard on that front in terms of getting in touch and making sure that the relationship is strong. In terms of outside of the UK, we've probably not done much on the continent. I think most of our focus has been on Liberia, where the impact can be felt more in terms of what we can do on the ground. So we kind of focused more on our partnerships in Liberia than partnerships on the continent or in other parts of the world.
All right. Once again, his name is Mr. Fidel C.T. Budy. He is our studio guest here on the Max K Talk Show, special edition of the Max K Talk Show. And of course, also he is a candidate for he is a candidate of the PhD and a researcher at Aberystwyth University here in the United Kingdom. And now let's slip a little bit now into pursuing maybe happiness through education. That you are now a candidate for pursuing your PhD as well. This is where I started the question about back home education and so. Why going all the way?
Well, the thing is, when I decided to do a master's degree in 2013, it was because of experiences that I had in Liberia from visits that I made there in 2009, 2010, 2011, and 12, and saw how deplorable our health system was and how we needed to try and come up with new ways to improve our health sector. So I felt that I needed the necessary experience. I needed to be trained to understand how health systems work. And so, yeah, so I enrolled at the University of Sheffield on a master's program in public health. with a focus on international development, because I wanted, obviously Liberia is a developing country, and international development gives you an understanding of those blocks that you'll need to work with non-governmental organizations. So whilst completing my my master's, I did a module on environment and development. And I remember the essay question that I had to answer was looking at how land use across the world would be affected by this shift towards alternative fuel, so like biofuels, so like using palm oil as diesel, using sugarcane as ethanol, as petrol, and how that was kind of changing the way that we use land. And my research for that essay, I looked at Sao Paulo in Brazil, and started to understand that this issue with land and how land use was changing, and how that was affecting indigenous people and poor rural communities was a global problem. So it wasn't just something that was restricted to Brazil. It was something that was happening all over the world, especially in the global south. So obviously, as inquisitive as I was, I started to look into it. And then my interest kind of grew in the whole issue of land grabbing, access to land, and the sort. But then also, whilst at the University of Sheffield, the department I was in also had like a day where they encouraged a lot of the master students to consider the possibility of doing a PhD. So they brought in some PhD students, brought in some lecturers, brought in some people who were from funding organizations to just talk, just give you an idea of what it is to do a PhD. And I've got a friend, I've got a friend from Cameroon, he's back home now, who was on the course, and Eric and I were very close at the time, and we both had a conversation. We thought, oh, this, we should consider doing this PhD thing. Obviously, you get to do a research project, you develop new skills, but then also, you can contribute more significantly, because once you complete a PhD, you become an expert in that field. So when you talk, people will listen to what you have to say because they know you're an expert. You've spent 3 to 4 years researching this one issue, and so you've got peers or people higher than you, professors and lecturers now examining your work and coming out and say, yeah, Max has done what he needed to do. Max is now a PhD holder. So you become an expert. And I felt that, look, especially when it came to reading on Liberia, when I read on Liberia in terms of land grabbing and the impact of land grabbing on rural communities, the conversation was dominated by scholars from the West. So people who came from the US, from the UK, from other parts of Europe, who were going to Liberia during research and then trying to interpret how people in Liberia were experiencing. And the thing about researching a community is, if you're not from that community, you miss some of the nuanced message or messages that will be in some of the conversation. For example, when I'm interviewing a Liberian person and ask them a question, and then trying to get a reaction, and they go, means a lot in our culture. It means like you don't even want to hear what I have to say. But then someone who is not a Liberian will not understand what that means. And I think I felt that, look, going in as a Liberian will mean that I can add my voice to the conversation, but it's going to be a native voice. It's a voice of someone who is from the country, who understands some of those nuanced meanings and things that we could find out. And so, I spoke with my master supervisor, and he said, look, it's a good idea. Initially, I was going to do a research project looking at the Palava Hut project, which was something that was recommended by the TRC, that, they should have this project where people will go, where you have victims of the war and perpetrators of crimes under one Palava Hut, and then the perpetrator confesses
and reconciliation.
Exactly. So it's kind of, I think it's a retrospective. There's a term but it's some kind of resolution process. And the whole idea was to see if it worked in Liberia and see if we can apply that to other countries that are just coming out of war, post-conflict countries as well. But then that project didn't go ahead, and then I turned my attention to doing research on land, and then obviously the opportunity at Aberystwyth University was brought to my attention. So I applied for the opportunity, sat an interview, put in a project proposal, which was accepted, and then got the funding to do my research here at Aberystwyth.
Fidel, you wrote a couple of papers. Some of them have been published, which I'm going to share with our audience as well. In terms of especially, let's start from the this paper you wrote, which says Liberia's largest palm oil producer pulls out of a sustainability roundtable. What does this mean for rural communities? That was in August 2018, just last year. And did you go down to do the research all the way there, or something you just came out to see? So what was the story behind this other project?
Well, the thing is, Golden Viridian is one of the biggest oil palm plantation companies in Liberia. And in end of July last year, they decided that they were going to pull out of the roundtable on sustainable oil palm, the RSPO, which is a volunteer organization that you can join voluntarily, but it's a certification organization where they have certain principles. So some of the principles include free prior informed consent before any operations of plantations can start. They have principles including corporate social responsibilities for organizations that work in these rural communities to develop the communities so that the people who live on the land can actually benefit from the land. So obviously GVL had been a part of it for many years. They've been having a lot of issues with Liberians in Buto, or in the Buto district, and they felt that coming out of the RSPO could probably allow them to expand their operations without having to face any wrath from the organization. And the question I was asking was just, look, what does this mean? Because if one big player comes out of such a safeguarding framework, then what does that mean for other big players as well, like Sam Darby and like Equatorial Palm? And what does that mean for the rights of people? Because the RSPO was a place where people can go and complain about GVL and about other big oil palm companies. And they felt that, okay, coming out was just, we didn't know what will happen, and we still don't know what will happen. But it was just asking that question, something for people to think about. So, what the news, to make sense of what the news was.
Now let's take a let's have a look at this other one, where you wrote, you say, no, Mr. President, land rights before changes to citizenship. I think that was the time the president delivered his first, the inaugural address also, when he was talking about citizenship also. What were you trying to push here, actually?
Well, I think it was after the State of the Nation address, his first State of the Nation address, where he talked about giving, he talked about, this Negro clause in our Constitution, where if you're not Black, or you're not of Black descent, you can't buy and own land in Liberia. And the president talked about, looking at that clause and trying to either replace or repeal the clause. And my argument in that paper, in that article, was that, look, I don't disagree. From the time I was a young man, back in the 90s, when I first started to form my thought process, I felt that the Negro clause in our Constitution was something that we needed to have a conversation about as Liberians. especially given the fact that, you know, we leave our country. We're now talking about dual nationalities. You know, a lot of Liberians left our country, came here, went to the US, and have foreign citizenship without any restriction based on color. So I felt, yes, there was a time that was something used to safeguard. We needed to have a conversation. But my fear was, if we take that out, and you've got a lot of Lebanese businessmen and a lot of Indian businessmen in Liberia who have the financial muscle to go out there and buy huge swathes of Liberian land, if we hadn't passed the Land Rights Act protecting customary land rights for rural communities, then these guys could buy up all the land by the time they had the rights to become citizens, before rural people could even have any land to grow food on. Having seen the effects or the impacts of limited access to land firsthand as part of my research, I felt that any decision to repeal that clause without first signing the Land Rights Act and protecting customary land rights would have been very detrimental for rural communities.
Let me read this portion of this, which of course you support the president. That land right is key for rural development. You see it here, historically, in Liberia, rural communities have always had the raw end of the deal when it comes to concessions. What are you talking about here? What sort of raw deal? The people taking development in their community, in their backyards.
Sorry, Max, I think the internet just went off a little bit there. I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, I'm reading this portion where you said the secure land rights brings better deals. You said historically in Liberia, rural communities have always had the raw end of the deal when it comes to concessions. I'm asking, I say, where is the raw deal when in fact the development is going right behind their houses?
No, the thing is, when I say raw deal, look, if you look at Firestone, I just wrote a story map that's going to get published soon on Firestone and how rubber came to Liberia. And when Firestone came to Liberia, the government offered them 1 million hectares of land, acres of land. People who were on the land were thrown off the land without any compensation or consultation. That's a raw deal. That's not, even though, yes, Firestone Plantation came and they built houses there and there's roads that the people can use, but the people are not receiving any benefit from the land that their ancestors had lived on for many, many years. And that's why I said it's a raw deal. That for historically, if you look at Bombing County in Senja District, where BF Goodrich and then Guthrie operated, same thing happened. The people woke up one morning, and saw, foreigners in their villages and towns cutting down trees and like, oh, the president said we can come and plant rubber here, and well, you can't use this land anymore. So that's a raw deal. Yes, they might build schools. Yes, they might build clinics. Yes, they might build some roads. But then in terms of rent from the land, when these companies were paying rent for the land, that the rent money was going directly to the national government, and none of that money was filtering back into the pockets of ordinary people in rural spaces. Because look, what we fail to realize, and having lived in a rural community myself, is that people don't just grow food on land. The people use the bush to get bush meat. They use the rivers for fishing. They use the bush to get wood for their fires, to make coal, to build homes. So the land offers more. And not only that, but people have some ancestral attachment to land. If your parents and your forefathers have lived in one place for so long, you have a special attachment to that place. When someone come and tell you, well, you can't use this place anymore, that's something that is emotionally disturbing for a lot of people, and it puts them in a situation where they're struggling. And that's the point I was trying to make in that article.
All right. One important one I read in the article as well. One important point I came across, which of course, perhaps you could expand a little bit to educate others there. You said, although the government is aware of global discussions about the significance of land ownership for rural development, they have so far stalled the progress of the law. President Weah must fast track the passage of the law in its current form and use it as a springboard to develop rural Liberia. Ghana multiple sources of investment and funding for rural development, as well as ensure the stability of rural communities. Let's look at the proposal more closely. It's how do you want the president to fast track the?
Well, we're talking about the beginning of 2018 here. So this law has been signed. This law has been signed in September 2018. Yeah. What I was saying at the time, look, the Land Rights Act was something that the Liberian government did not coin. It wasn't Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's having a light bulb moment like, oops, I want to protect land rights for ordinary people. It was something that the international partners were pushing for. So the international partners, civil society groups, were the ones telling the government of Liberia, look, you need to secure land rights for rural people, especially after in 2009, the United Nations passed the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So there were a lot of international external influences on the government. So in 2014, there was a bill sent to the national legislature to protect land rights. First and foremost, when I spoke with a lot of people working on the land deals in Liberia, people from the Land Commission, people from civil society groups, and residents in communities that were affected, their biggest concern was that the lawmakers were going to change the law so much and take out most of the important stipulations that when it came out, it would be so watered down that it wouldn't have any potency. It wouldn't make any difference for ordinary people. And that's what I was trying to argue, that look, we're in 2018. This law has been in the parliament, in the legislature since 2014. It is time, since President Sirleaf didn't want to push this through, that President Weah needs to fast track it. Well, obviously fast tracking, either he didn't understand what fast tracking meant, or either his fast tracking is 6, 7, 8 months later, but then the law was not passed until until September 2018. In the end, we've got the act. We now have to go through the 2-year process of identifying customary lands across the country, so that then people can be, get a deed, so the communities get deed to that land, so they own the land. And then when concessions come in, they have to go and talk directly to the people. So you go into the community, you speak to the land committee, they would tell you how much money they want for rent, what things they want you to do, so that when you don't do them, right now, as things are, when these companies go in, promise all of these things, and they do not provide them, you can't really challenge them because you didn't sign a deal with them. It's the government that signed a deal. So you have to go and complain to the government, and then the government will not do anything about it. So when you go and deal directly with the rural communities, when you don't do what you promise, our old people, if you tell them I will do this thing and you don't do it, they will come in, my son, you say I was going to do the thing, so you'll be able to hold them accountable, straight, directly accountable. And that's what I was trying to argue. And look, the act is there. We're still not out of the woods. It's been passed, but we now need to implement the act. And when I was in Liberia recently, you were at the event that I had at Corina Hotel. And one of the things that the guys, the stakeholders there were saying is, look, it's good having these policies, but then implementation has always been an issue for Liberia. Mm-hmm. So we need to now wait and see how this CDC-led government will now implement the principles of the act and ensure that these communities have their deeds, and then companies have to go negotiate directly with them and then pay them the rent for the land.
Wow. I mean, let's hope if that's happening to work, which of course perhaps you'll go into it more when we talk about your recent visit to Liberia and in fact the research, how far is it and things. But just to let you know, tomorrow we'll have we'll go to UIC on the Max Kpakio talk show. We'll be having a guest as Christmas, Sally, one of the advocates there. And of course, on Thursday, we'll have Ambassador Canby Adams here as a special guest as well. Then on Monday, we'll be flying to Kenya to speak to the liaison at the Ministry of Sport there in Kenya. And then on Wednesday, we'll be having Councillor Jerome Verdier, who was the former chairman of the TRC Budy. So this is how the Max K Talk Show is going to look like between now to the weekend and of course the week coming. Fidel, let's take you to the recent visit to Liberia. You went to Liberia. I know I was there. I attended the event. You went to present your project or do a presentation to some corporate organizations also there. Also, in terms of this project, what is it? Because it is formed part of your well, your degree anyway, your PhD level of study. Okay, what is it that you want out of this project? Even though, why did you have to choose Liberia? Uh, what benefit or recommendations did you make into whom and how you think this research going to benefit Liberia?
Well, the thing is, the trip to Liberia was something that the funders of my PhD actually allowed me to do. So I could go to Liberia and feedback to the communities where I did my research. So in December, I went to Liberia. I went to the communities. So I went down to Bomi County and spoke with the individuals that I had interviewed before to kind of give them an idea of what are some of the findings of my research. And then in terms of the event, that the pictures you're showing now is from we had stakeholders. So these individuals were members from different civil society groups, NGOs, members of SAMDABI, where I did the research, and it was just kind of telling them as well, like I did in rural places, that look, this is what I found. This is what I think it means for rural residents, for policymakers, for the company, in terms of how we can move things forward. In terms of the outcome of the research, what I've been looking at is how people in Senja district, where you have a perceived land grab going on with Samdabi, how were they experiencing the grabs, and not only, but how did they respond to it as well? Because when you read literature on land grabbing in Sub-Saharan Africa, the portrayal of rural communities are that they're victims, that they're passive actors, that they just sit there and these people come in and do whatever they want to do and they don't react at all. So I wanted to go in and just understand, is this really what is going on? And if not, what actually is going on? What I found from my research was that land grabs do have an impact on livelihoods for subsistence farmers, because these people depend on the land to be able to feed themselves and their families. So when the land is taken away, and then the company comes in and does not have enough jobs to absorb all of the people who used the land before, some people have to go without a means to a livelihood. So that was one of the findings. We also found that, well, I also found that in terms of power dynamics, it affects power between local people, political elites, and concession companies. Now, interestingly, in Liberia, like I mentioned earlier, historically, land in Liberia has been controlled by the central government. Concession companies come in, speak with the national government, get authorization, go in without talking to the people on the land whatsoever, and just do whatever they want to do. That has changed significantly recently because of all of the different international frameworks.
Yeah.
And not only that, but because partners are putting pressure on the Liberian government to not continue business as usual. So that kind of altered the way that people actually now respond to these episodes of land grabbing. So local people now understand, having worked with NGOs and civil society groups, that look, people can't just come into your community and take the land. You have a right to the land. You can actually react to that. And one of the reactions that I found was in 2011, local communities from Bomi and Cape Mal counties came together and complained against Sam Dabi at the RSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. And Sam Dabi was called in to answer questions. They had to negotiate with local people. They had to form a committee to discuss this. The complaint was withdrawn. But then the point is, where if you look at during the regime of President Totman, Tolbert, and Dole, and Taylor, where these communities could not react in that way. Now, because of all these different frameworks, they're now able to react. So the power dynamics has shifted a little bit to give rural communities more opportunities to react, which is a good thing in a way, because now they can't just be passive. As the president would say, they can't be spectators on their own land. When people come in, they have the right to complain. Another thing we found as well in terms of identity, so the landscape, you've had a place with forests, beautiful big forests. Now you chop all of those forests, are chopped down, so the landscape looks different in terms of the identity, but also the identity of the people, because we know like the Poro society and the Sandy society has been prominent in this part of Liberia, and they normally have the bush where people go and stay for a long time, but most of those bushes has been now chopped down. So it's affecting the people's way of life. So the people country school that they used to go to discipline their children, bring them up in the way that they want to bring them up, those things are now being eroded by these land grabs as well. But then also fascinating, what was also fascinating as well is the language of the people. Predominantly before B.F. Goodrich in the early 1900s, people in that part of the country spoke Gola. You probably had about 100% of the population speaking Gola. But then recently, there was a report in 2009 by the County Development Council that said about 36% of the people in Senje spoke Gola. So obviously, more and more people who are living in the district don't speak the language. So you've got Gisi people there, you've got Loma people there. I think I saw a Kru person there as well. So even when I was talking to people, you can see that the language of the district have been diluted because people come from all over Liberia to find jobs there, and that was affecting the local identity in terms of their language as well. And then the final thing was the Land Rights Act, having, that was the final thing that the research found, that these different tussles in terms of power struggles and with the government led to more and more calls for laws to be passed that will recognize the land rights of indigenous rural communities so that they can then deal directly with the company to be able to hold them accountable. So those were the things we found in terms of the impact. In terms of responses, so how people were responding, we talked about the RSPO, but then those who couldn't get jobs with the company didn't just sit down and do nothing. They were not lazy and just sat there waiting for people to come from somewhere to help them. Some of them diversify their livelihood sources. Some people became builders, so they started to build homes for people who were building. Some of them started to burn coal, for example, as another way of generating income. Some people, because they didn't have access to land to grow rice on, they had the soft area where you water, they now had hard ground. They started to grow cassava instead. So so that those are reactions that the people. So they didn't just sit there. Okay, I've lost the land I used to grow rice on, so I'll just sit down. No, some people actually shifted and started to react, and that's what I used the term reaction and not resistance, because resistance is usually like protesting the land, the concession, against the concession, whereas reaction is finding new ways to respond to a phenomenon like land grabbing. Okay, yes, they kick me off the land. It's not right. I don't like it. I can go through the channels to complain about it. But in the meantime, I can take other actions as a reaction to what, so finding new ways to get food, going further into the bushes to find new land, like burning coal, and those things were other ways that people kind of reacted to the land grabbing phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. So the research itself, I know it took you into a remote part of Liberia, where I saw some photographs as well. Distinctive photographs. I've been looking for them actually to show to our people. I can't find them. What was it like, especially when you made mention of big companies going and somebody waking up in the morning and seeing somebody behind their yard or behind the farm they have gone to farm, and they see somebody way in the forest there also. When you met the people, in terms of perhaps perhaps they felt more comfortable talking to you because you were part of them already. I saw you in the kitchen eating what they were eating and mingling with them. What was the reaction like when you started giving them the questions? What was the most difficult question you ever asked them that they took time to answer? What was their reactions?
Well, I think to be honest, before I went into Senja, I didn't know this, but before I went in, others had gone before me. So you had civil society groups that had gone in there and done research with these people. So they were kind of aware of the process of a researcher coming in and asking
Okay,
questions.
right.
So for a lot of them, they weren't, it wasn't a new phenomenon to them. It wasn't the first time they were talking to someone. And I think a lot of the times, what actually came out of it was the fact that people felt, not felt, people actually said to me, okay, somebody else came here before you and asked similar questions, and then they left, and we've not heard anything, so how do we know that talking to you will yield anything different? And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go back last year, go back to the, after, a year and 6 months after I left, to go back in and say, look, I didn't forget about you. I've been analyzing the data. I've been writing up. I've come back now to tell you exactly what I found and then how we can take this forward. Obviously, this not superintendent, the representative of the district, who is the Honorable Melvin Snow, Edwin Snow, I invited him to the event. He didn't come. Didn't send a proxy. So it wasn't just sending an email. I actually spoke with him first, told him what I was going to do, and then send the email. So he, obviously he was out of the country, but he could have sent someone in to represent him, which he
Take
didn't
note,
do.
yeah.
Obviously I was grateful that Sam Dhabi, because they came, they were represented there. They had a guy who came in and answered questions. Their head of communication, I think it was,
Yeah.
who came in to answer some of the questions. So, look, at the end of the day, I sat down with people and I made it very clear to them that, look, this is not something that's going to stop and change all the problems. What I can do with the findings is communicate that through academic papers, through newspaper articles, through mediums like these, when I come and talk to you and tell people what it is that's going on there, so that their stories are being told in their own voice. So what they told me is what I'm telling you now, and people who are listening can hear, okay, this is what Senja residents are going through with Sam Dhabi, and they can then take on the advocacy role and then try and do something to alter the lives of the people. Not only that, as a Liberian, I always want to give back to my people. It doesn't matter what part of the country it is. I've got a very strong bond with the towns and where I did my research in Senje. Whenever I'm in Liberia, I make it my responsibility to go and visit these communities. And I believe that personally, on a personal level in the future, I will probably develop a project that I can take in there to kind of work with people to give them an alternative to what they have at the moment. But as things stand, so far it's just putting out, papers saying exactly what is going on. So, at the moment I've got a couple of paper. Well, I've got one paper under review. I'm submitting another one tomorrow to be reviewed as well. There are story maps that have come out. I've given presentations about it in Norway. Uh, Obviously, I gave the one presentation in Liberia. I gave another presentation at the National Library of Wales on Thursday last week. And in September, I'll be in London at the Royal Geographical Society annual conference, and I'm hoping to probably give another talk about what's going on there. So in terms of the message is getting out. We hope to, I'd hope, obviously I had a good relationship with Dr. Brandy, who is head of the Land Authority. Unfortunately, apparently he's resigned because of problems with the current administration. So we wait to see who comes in. And, once some of these papers are published, we will be sending them to the relevant stakeholders to say, look, these are the things that we found. here are they written out. Use them to inform the policies you're going to be making when you're going to deal with rural communities. Because it's not just Senja, it's rural communities. You can apply it to rural communities across Liberia.
Right. Fidel, I mean, land grab, the issue of land grab, I mean, I know you've been passionate about this and very concerned as well. From where we stand, I mean, signing the document, that important document is one thing, but, sticking to and also making sure that what you signed, is actually live for its purpose. Um, what is your what is your own thought about the whole land grab thing in Liberia? You think it's something that in the next year or so, it's not, it's just something going to be history now to say, well, nothing like that we're going to hear. There's no going to be no more trouble in, in rural Liberia or so, that our people will begin to actually know that they have a right and their right will be respected.
Well, I'm not optimistic if that's the question you're asking me. I think,
Mm.
look, you were at the presentation, and not just one, but I think it was two or three individuals who raised the issue about the fact that we've got, look, Liberia, and one of the things that President Sirleaf did was she passed so many laws to try and make Liberia a country of laws. The problem is we don't implement these laws. The
Yeah,
laws are on the book. A lot of the people in Liberia do not even know that these laws have been passed. There are laws in the country that are supposed to be protecting certain people, and the people who the law is supposed to protect don't even know that the law is there. So
that's it.
that is the one problem that we have as a country. We need to. When we were in Liberia recently, I was speaking to one of my colleagues who works for the UN system, and they were telling me that even with the Land Rights Act that has been passed, no, no, it was the local government act. Usually, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has to print them in handbills within a certain period of time. So the UN system was trying to give money to print, but they wanted to go through a proper vetting process. So they wanted to put the bids out there and get different companies applying. And apparently, someone in the ministry were like, no, 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 give us the money, and then we will go. And like, no, we can't give you the money. A transparent process. We have to put the bid out. People have to bid, and then it has to be a competitive process. And then we have to then look at different individuals to see who has the right portfolio to do the job, and then we can award the bid. And they're like, no, 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 give us. So they were, because these guys want to get hold of the money so they can, as we said, damage it. They would delay getting these bills printed into handbill and getting it out to the Liberian people. And in terms of the laws, I think, look, we have a very long way to go. We'll need to see whether the president will support the land authority now that he will probably have his own person heading the authority, to see whether they can start the process of uh, because what is supposed to happen is once the bill is passed, they now need to go and speak to all of these communities to then demarcate the land. So then give them a
Mm.
deed. So look, this is the deed. So these 50 acres of land belongs to this town. So
Right.
you're in this town. This is how you guys can use this deed. This other deed belongs to this person. This land is government land. This one is public land, and these are private. So that process needs to start soon because it will probably take 1-2 years to complete. Because the way they're going to do is through oral history. So they listen to the elders in the community. They would tell them, okay, yes, this is the boundary for our land, and then based on that, make a decision of that. Okay, so that process needs to start soon. And if it, if it starts soon, then we will start to become a bit more optimistic that okay, maybe something could happen. Because until the deed is in the hands of the people that are supposed to be the custodians of that land, then the law means nothing. You can tell the
Mm.
people, oh yeah, your rights protected, but okay, so what's our land? People don't know how much land they have, and whether the companies are already encroaching on their land, whether they need to go and negotiate with them. And I remember one of the quotes from talking to one government official as part of my research, and talking about the fact that when you have a deed, you see, one of the reasons why agriculture in our country is, it's not the main reason, but one of the reasons why we don't have food production on the scale that we could have is because rural communities don't have deeds. You can't go to a bank without a deed. Say, oh look, I want 20,000. I need to buy this equipment
All
to
right. Yeah.
develop land to produce food. Like, you know, in Wales where we live,
Yeah.
farm there, 80% of the land is farmland in Wales. And these farmers can go to the bank, say, look, here's my deed. I've got 20 acres of land. I need to develop my land. I want to put a chicken, a portrait house on my land. I need 20,000 in pounds. Here's my deed as collateral. Because these communities don't have that, even if you and I want to go in there and work with them to start an agricultural project like a cooperative, for example, it's difficult to get the money because they don't have anything as collateral that they can give to banks. Once these lands are deeded, they will then have something that they can use to be able to access finance. So in the piece that I wrote, that's one of the things I said. They can use the deeds to access finance. Finance that can, you don't have to wait on government now. You can get someone like yourself, someone like me, someone from the States who has an idea of how cooperatives work. Go in there and say, look, this is how you're going to do it. Set up a business model for them. Go to the bank, say, look, here's the business plan. These are the deeds that you can use as collateral, and this is how we project these things. So, there are a lot of opportunities that could come out of this, but we need to see results in terms of implementation. The government has to get off his whatever is sitting on and start to work in the interest of rural communities and make sure that these demarcation process go on so that the people get the deed that they need so that projects can start to spring up to empower these rural communities.
All right, we've got about 10 more minutes, but those of you that just joined in, his name is Mr. Fidel C.T. Budy. He is the Secretary General of the Union of Liberian Organizations in the United Kingdom, and also a PhD candidate and researcher at Aberystwyth University here in the United Kingdom, of course. And we're talking about his research, his area of interest. We're just about coming to the end of the show. But Fidel, let me come to you first, because for us here, since we've been here, whenever development is taken somewhere and, community is supposed to know about it, they will know about it. Not that the government will inform the community through their member of parliament. But if they have to knock at your door, they will come and knock at your door and tell you, say, this portion of land over there, we put in something there. If they will put notice all around, they will do it there. But in the context of our country, it's quite different. Because people always say, oh, we got representatives there also. The issue of concessions agreement, you in the area now, do you think it's really, really unhealthy that our people should continue to just rely on perhaps their representative and superintendents to come and tell them, say, oh, tomorrow the people are coming here or they come and start work? Or is it about time now that we should change the whole dimension and say, look, from the day it starts, the people should get involved? How should we do it?
Well, my research in Bombing County, one of the things that I've written about, or one of the things I will be writing about, is the fact that it's not your usual concession story. So usually, if you pick up a book now that has anything to do with land grabbing, it will tell you that these companies go in, they don't talk to people, and just go and do. Now, the term land grabbing in and of itself is a very difficult term to try and sell because some of the definitions that we have are based on size. So they say like, well, even if it's a legal thing, even if the people were consulted, once it's over 1,000 hectares of land, that's a land grab. Because nobody should be taking more than 1,000 hectares. That's more land than you need. So it's like you're grabbing too much land, even if it's legal. Others will talk about forceful removal of people, displacement of people of the land. So the definition of land grabbing in and of itself is complex and complicated. So it depends how you approach it first and foremost. But most people will talk about, most literature, most books and articles on land grab will tell you about something violent, something related to violence, that people went in, did not talk to the people, just went and started operating. For my case in Senja, it was different. I interviewed 30 residents as part of my project, and everyone that I spoke with, the majority of people made it very clear to me that before operations were started by Sam Dabi, there were some levels of consultation that went on. And one of the things that I found, which you don't find in most of the books, which I will be writing about, to say, look, this is a new knowledge that we've seen, is the fact that the women, given the culture of our rural communities where it's male dominated, the women were actually invited and given a seat at the table, and they were part of the consultation process. All of the women I spoke with said to me, they call us, they talk to us, they brought a computer, they put a thing on, PowerPoint, TV, we saw it, they made promises. Now, and again, going back to the term reaction and not resistance. The reason we say reaction is because reaction means any action that you take towards having a concession there. And most people are more concerned about their insertion into the concession than not having the concession there. Most people are concerned about getting jobs with the concession, getting contracts with the concession, making sure that the concession is building roads, making sure the concession is bringing health centers, building toilets and pumps for them. It's more, the people care more about what they get from the concession. They don't say, we don't want the concession here. It's okay, the concession is already here. They came, they talked to us, that's fine. But the things that they promised us that they were going to deliver on, we want them to deliver on these things, because you can't have these guys here making money from our land and then we're not benefiting from the land. That was the biggest point of contention for the people. It was, previous concessions, yes, they weren't, when BF Goodrich came, they weren't consulted. When Guthrie came, they weren't consulted. But this time, from the people I spoke with, because other people might have different things to say, but the ones that I spoke to, the narrative that I got from them is that they were consulted by Sam Dabi, but then the company is not living up to the things that they promised. So they promised they were going to build roads, they promised they were going to build latrines and pumps, they promised they were going to create so much jobs for people. Those things are not happening. Not even the healthcare center there. People, if you don't work for the company, can't go and use the health center, which people have an issue with. It's like, I don't have to work for the company. You own our land. The least you can do is allow me to use your health center when I'm sick, or for my kids to go to your school. You can't say I must work for the company before I can access the school. So those are the kind of things that people are concerned about. In terms of consultation, people were consulted this time by Sam Dabi, and that was new, because I went in there and I felt that, look, I was going to find out that people weren't consulted and this thing was a horrible land grab. But the fact of the matter was, you have to see what the data says, and the data said that people were consulted.
Okay, that's great. Let's hope in other part of Liberia is also happening and will happen in the future. If there's anything like concession agreement is to be signed, the people need to get involved. They have to know that some strangers are coming behind their back. Also, but Fidel, before we let you go, a time fast spent now, as we come to the end of this special edition of the Max Kpakio Show. Any other thing you want to share with us, but I have anything to touch on or ask you about that you can share with us just before?
Well, yeah, I think just to talk, in terms of the project itself, I was part of a project called the Global Rural Project. So it was funded by the European Research Council. I think the funding was 2.7 million pounds to do research in 34 different case studies. So we've done research in China, in Brazil, here in Wales, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, Liberia, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Malawi, Mauritius, and now we are bringing all of this together. So all of the information I've talked about, you can find on our website. So it's global-rural.org. So it's global-rural.org. So you can download our presentations. The papers that we've published will be on there for free, people to download them and read them. Data will be on there. Story maps are there. Like short stories, just with pictures to show you some of the different things we've done. You can look at the project members. So there's 11 of us on the project. So you can see each of us know what we've been doing before joining the project. The project ends on Thursday, so the 31st of January is the end of the project. I've come towards the end of my PhD now. I've completed my thesis. We're just waiting to get an external examiner to come and set a date for me to defend what I've written over the last 3 years. I'm now going to be opening a new chapter. So obviously hitting the job market, trying to secure a job, and then start to find ways to use the knowledge that we've acquired to impact the world that we live in. So it's been a very good great journey, and I think I must say thank you to the people of Senja district, because without their stories, I wouldn't have completed my PhD. I always have a special place in my heart for them, and when I go to Liberia, I always go and see them. I will hopefully, God's willing, one day work with them in terms of some project related to agriculture. But in the meantime, I will continue to tell their story, uh, and hope that our government can listen. Hope that civil society groups in Liberia can listen, their direct representatives can listen, and then make sure that when they're making decisions and policies, that they incorporate the story of these people in that, so that whatever framework that they develop is something that the people actually need and want. So they're not just going in and doing their own thing. But yeah, it's been a great time, and I'm very excited to have done this project. And as a Liberian, I hope that I've made some contribution to our story as well.
If you want to say on this note, we just want to say thank you very much. Just before we let you go, this one, let me just go inside your home. You've been, undertaking the PhD at the same time. You got married during that time. At the same time, family was added. God bless the union with another, individual. How was it in terms of balancing the research work where you have to read here extensively, or take notes and things, and balancing it with the family, especially the other one? I just saw her beautifully sitting in the chair in the office also. How was it like?
The thing is, you adjust. My wife has been very supportive. She's allowed me to, especially last year when she was over here in Aberystwyth, allowed me to spend time working, and she looked after the baby most of the time. I made sure that I contributed as well on weekends, so that but yeah, my wife is very very helpful. Obviously, in Aberystwyth, I live in a small community. My local church members were very, very helpful as well. A lot of the women in the church would take turns coming over to help out. And obviously, you made the trip to Aberystwyth as well a couple of times.
Yeah.
And yeah. So in terms of support locally and throughout the UK, there was a lot of support. And look, the thing is, look, you know, God, my belief is God always give us tasks that we can handle. And obviously, God first, He provided all of the opportunities and the strength for us to do what we did. My wife and I, managed, and she was, very helpful. My daughter had to go to Liberia for a few months as well, which was very good for me because it meant that I could concentrate for most of
Yeah.
last year, writing, and doing all that. So by the time they came back to the UK, I had finished actually my first draft of my thesis. So I was just editing. So, it's easier to hold a baby and edit, than it is to try and write. But God had His plan, and He worked everything out for the good, and I'm grateful to everybody
Wow.
for this.
Well, Fidel, to be honest with you, we are proud of you as well, because we all left Liberia on the same date. We went to Cuba and we end up here. The struggle we've been there together, but to be able to, all of us that came here, actually, just to elaborate a little bit, we've all actually managed to go further in education. What we left Liberia for, we managed to reach to some point that we can say, yes, I am, I am somewhere I can rest more. If I want to continue, I can continue. So, I mean, I just want to appreciate all you, and appreciate all of us as well for what we're doing, because at the end of the day, this knowledge, the way you start already, the whole world is already benefiting. Liberia is benefiting hugely as well. So we just want to say we appreciate you, and we'll continue to give you your own support as well, and we can support one another. But on this note, we want to say, Fidel, thank you so much. But please, if you get out of the video, please go back, because once you go back to watch it, you can be able to write something there. I think people are looking for information now regarding, you. So if you can, even the papers you wrote, if you can give us some direction there as to how some people can go and research the paper and they can have it on their own, that would be great. The website, you can get added there as well. But we'll be very pleased to have you here another time, especially so when we're talking about issues of Liberia. Thank you so much for tonight, and we appreciate you very, very much.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right. That's the Max K talk show here. Our studio guest was I know a couple of months from now we will change the Mr. to Doctor. I want to say thank you so much for everything. Thanks for appearing on the show, the Max K talk show tonight, this morning or this evening. It was an honor that indeed having you as a guest. Alright, tomorrow, just before I take leave of you, let me let you know for tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be having we'll be playing host to an activist from the USA, Liberian, Christmas Sally, who recently went to Liberia and took photographs with many people. But one photograph that actually cost him a great deal with some of the great friends and family was a picture that he took with Prince Y. Johnson. So we will be having him tomorrow as special guest as well. And then day after tomorrow, that's Thursday, one of Liberia's greatest gospel musicians, Ambassador Canvey Adams, will be in the city here with me. We'll be talking about her career, the music industry, especially gospel music industry in Liberia, and a lot more. On Monday, we'll be going to Kenya. We'll be speaking to government officials there in Kenya. We'll try to balance the equation as well. Not only on Liberia, this. On Wednesday, we'll have the former chairman of the TRC, Councillor Jerome J. Vaudier Jr. We're just trying to work on the time. We've got a date already Wednesday. We're trying to work on the time, hopefully we'll be at the same time. So this is how Max K talk show is going to be like between now and next week. I want to say thank you so much for your time, your contribution. May God bless you. God bless the continent of Africa as usual. And above all else, may God bless Mama Liberia. I'm out for now. Have a very, very pleasant night. I